Tell me what mental health or mental health issues means to you.
Um, to me, I think when I use the word mental health or mental health issues, I'm thinking about, first of all, I think the word issues is like a new way of saying illness. And then there's this whole like weird stigma around the word illness, not being well, which is like, I can understand why people don't necessarily want to use those words, but I think that's essentially what it's talking about. Many times it's people who are actually diagnosed with some kind of illness that's affecting them psychologically more than, but that can also have impacts on their physical body. So, I can think of kids who have anxiety that then produces stomach issues, for example. So I don't always think of like mental, I think it starts with something that's going on in your brain and that then can travel into all different parts of your body basically and cause all kinds of different reactions. I do think though that like the more I think about it, like a lot of, for example, my students, people now throw it around in like I think it used to be much more formalized. Like I have OCD disorder or something like that, right? And then now I feel like there's like these general terms like anxiety, for example, that I used, where I don't know that a kid, they may or may not be diagnosed, they may or may not be seeing someone outside of school or in school about that, but it's still being used, which I think is valid, but it's an interesting question about like what does it mean to be diagnosed anxiety disorder, and is it I don't even know if disorder is the right word anymore. Like, so I don't know. I think like basically I believe it's something that's starting in your brain that's affecting you in all different ways.
You mentioned how there's a stigma around the word illness. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that I don't know. I mean, that's a really good question. It's kind of like there's the same stigma I think around like if you're someone who's addicted to drugs, like you want to think of it as an illness. You don't necessarily want to think of it as just like, oh, you like just get your act together. You know, like it's an actual disease, something you cannot prevent. Yeah. But then illness also has this connotation about like not being well, not being normal, not being like. So I don't know exactly, and I don't even know what people prefer to be used as their like, mental health issues, which is why I think people say that. It's like so vague. It's like the least specific way of saying it so that no one gets hurt feelings. But there's probably like needs to be some education around like what is it? What is the best way to talk to people about it, basically. But yeah.
What is your experience as a teacher with your students and mental health, illness, issues, all that stuff? Because you were talking about anxiety earlier.
Yeah. I think, well, I'm going to say, since I'm the SWS teacher, I do think SWS attracts kids who are more vulnerable or more afflicted. I don't know, however you want to word it. Maybe even just more in touch with their mental health, period. Because a lot of kids who come up to SWS are seeking a smaller community. They feel overwhelmed by the mainstream school, the size of it, etc. So they often equate smaller community with like, will be more helpful when I deal with these issues that I might be having. So I think that my experience right now is actually a lot of my kids, I don't think it's proportional to the regular population. So it ranges from students who are hospitalized all the way to generalized anxiety that I would say is pretty normal for all students to have. But I do think that because in SWS people do talk about it more openly, more kids name it than they would. When I was a mainstream teacher, like kids wouldn't know that what they were describing to me, their feelings and stuff, I was like, oh, that you're feeling anxious. Like, let me give you the word that you need or whatever. Or it sounds a little bit like you're depressed. I don't know. Like, have you talked to someone about it or whatever? Whereas up here, I think people are like students are way more likely to be like, so I have anxiety, I see a therapist, and these are the way it manifests itself, and so what I need are this, and this. Like they're like hyper aware of it. Yeah. Which is, I think it's helpful. It does lead me, there are times though where I wonder, we've been talking a little bit about this in one of my classes. I don't know that it's directly connected to the mental health, but I will say that some kids who are made, who get anxious, or I don't even know what the right word for it is, but when you talk about topics that are like upsetting, for example, sometimes I've had in the past students who will be like, this makes me anxious, I need to leave, and I
Like
need to
the
go somewhere
triggering,
else.
yeah.
It's a triggering thing. And then but like it can happen a lot of times. And so then you start to wonder as a teacher, an interesting question I've asked myself is like, what is the threshold in which I want them to stay and hear the discussion and or let them leave? Right?
Yeah.
And so that is a really difficult thing for a teacher to decide, because obviously I think when we say triggering, our first thought is like, okay, someone who's undergone, say, sexual assault, and we're talking about sexual assault. Okay, obviously you can leave. But I mean more like you aren't a victim of sexual assault, or you don't like to talk about violence, but you're in a history class where you talk about violence all the time.
Yeah.
So like, is it that you're not able to push through the conversation? So there's some of these like, that fits under that mental health umbrella, but it's really unclear to me whether or not it's like good to leave those conversations, or whether it's good to sit through the conversation and hear it.
Yeah.
And I don't think the teachers know at all what the threshold should be, or how to interact with the kid around it, or anything like that.
Why do you think teachers lack that knowledge? Like,
I think that like a couple of years ago we did do the social workers gave there was a faculty meeting specifically on the topic of mental health. Most of the time when you're doing faculty training, it's about the most extreme cases. So it's about suicide prevention. So I'm like, okay, that's hugely important. Recognizing the signs of suicide.
yeah.
Okay, so that's definitely important. And then I'm like, but on my average day to day, it may be true that there are some kids who are like, that's signs that I need to look for. But on my day to day, I'm not dealing with kids who are like that night are going to contemplate suicide.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with like just like average mental health issues that are like, but we don't talk about that because there's so limited time for teachers to get together, to be trained on a certain something. So of course you're going to choose the one that's like the most dire need. That's like, we wouldn't want a kid to kill themselves. But like in reality, I think most of us are dealing with just average, like kids who are already being treated for depression, but like maybe take medication and we don't realize that like they didn't take it that day, or that they're switching medications and it's not feeling good to them. Like that kind of stuff is like a little less clear on how to talk about it. It'd be cool. I think it'd be a cool thing. I mean, when you're thinking about your project and stuff, like in what ways can we prepare teachers to have conversations with their students, like know the language to use and all of that stuff. But
Why do you think that like relationship between student and teacher is so important when it comes to mental health?
I mean, I think mental health is like super personal. It's like to tell someone that, because there's a lot of stigma attached to it, less and less. I think there was like even more 5 years ago. But again, I've also come up to SWS. I think I have an unrealistic like understanding of the way young people are actually seeing it. I think it's because it's hyper personal. I think it's easier to say to someone, I have Crohn's. Like this is a disease that impacts my stomach, and so I will be out. And that forever, I think Americans have seen mental health as like a weakness, like oh, you're just sad. Why do you have to take like medication for that, or like whatever it might be? And so I think that I think it's hard for students to tell people that they're suffering from whatever it is. And I also think a lot of people are uneducated. Even if a kid was to say to me, I have X thing, like, because you can have anxiety, but you can have all different versions of it. Like there's like all kinds of things that are complicated, and I don't think everyone's informed. So even if the kid were to tell the teacher, the teacher might be like, is this fake? Is that like real? Like just wake up and come to school. Like what is your problem? Like, so I just don't think that we're well on either side. I think it's really personal for the student to have to tell the teacher, and I think the teachers don't really know enough about it to react necessarily well. But I think in SWS, one of the reasons why the kids say it a lot is because we know each other outside of class. So like, I don't just see the kid in my class. I also see them in town meeting. I see them in committee meetings. Like I see them outside of class in this different way, which makes them, I think, more apt to tell us. And I don't think that can be replicated necessarily in the high school. So the question of like, how do you actually get kids to be willing to talk about it? I want to just add that teachers do know when a kid has a diagnosed mental health issue, if they have like some like a 504 or an IEP. So like that the teacher knows and there's information about it. Typically someone will send out some form, there'll be like a social worker, someone will say, just so you know, this kid, these are the ways in which we're helping service them so that if this happens, then do this. But those are, again, the most extreme cases.
Yeah.
They're for kids who are like not functioning really in school, that might end up hospitalized. Like it's rarely just that like kind of average level kid who has most of it under control, might have bad days, good days. That's where I think we don't quite know what's going on.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that, Why do you think the mainstream school and its size prevents those types of relationships from forming?
Well, I think, like I said, you have to feel really secure in your relationship with your teacher to tell them,
Yeah.
right? And then this might be like a bad cycle. So in the beginning of the year, you've got a teacher who's in the mainstream, let's say, who doesn't see their kids outside of class, other than maybe like if you make an appointment with them, obviously,
Yeah.
or if you happen to be in a club with them or something like that. So when I was a mainstream teacher, I see your kids, you see them once a day. And like you, and I still built really good relationships with my kids, but I didn't have the same amount of contact time that I do up here. So if you're a kid who has these issues and you're waiting to build trust to kind of tell the teacher what's going on, well, in the meantime, like you might be suffering from mental health stuff, which might kind of make your teacher assume that you're somebody you're not, like lazy, doesn't come to class, is late all of the time. So then your relationship is already under strain without the teacher even knowing that the thing is actually being caused by this other thing that you're afraid to tell them about because you don't have a good relationship. Like, I don't know, it feels like a negative cycle that's not the fault of the kid or of the teacher, but that if it were easier for kids or even parents or whoever to just come out and say the thing in the beginning, then it would repair, any damage that like could happen in the future because in the nature of mental health stuff, if you're a kid with like Crohn's, or you're a kid who like is in a wheelchair, or you have like an illness that's just out there, it's so clear, you can see it. You have this disability that's out there and you can see it. Teachers are more understanding. I mean, if you show up in a wheelchair and you're late, like you're in a wheelchair, you're late, nobody's gonna be like, what were you doing in the hallway? But if you are also suffering from a mental and you had to go to the bathroom for a long period of time because of like needing to calm down, or maybe you had a panic attack or something like that, it's not the same thing. You come in, there's an assumption that the person coming in, if you don't know them well enough, and they don't know anything about you, why are you late? Then you're like, you were just having a panic attack. You're not going to say like, I was having a panic attack. Like, which it would be nice if you could, but like, it's just not the way it works. It's like this weird vicious cycle, I think.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.